The briefing room fell silent when she walked in. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect, the kind that comes from disbelief. Lieutenant Kiera Vance stood 5'4" in her flight suit, hair pulled back in a regulation bun, carrying a tablet under one arm and a worn helmet bag in the other. The squadron patch on her shoulder bore the insignia of the 418th Tactical Fighter Wing, but nobody seemed to notice. What they noticed was her size, her youth, her gender. What they didn't notice was the small, faded pin near her collar, a silver talon gripping a lightning bolt. Only 3 people on the entire base wore that pin. "Lost sweetheart," someone called from the back row. Laughter rippled through the room. Kiera didn't flinch. She set her helmet bag down on the front table with a deliberate thud that echoed louder than it should have. Her call sign was stenciled across the side in white letters, Prophet. Some of the older pilots in the room stopped laughing. They knew that name. Most didn't. The operations officer, Major Reeve, stood near the projector screen with his arms crossed. He was new to the base, transferred in from stateside operations 3 weeks prior. He looked at Kiera with the same expression everyone else wore, skepticism wrapped in condescension. "You're in the wrong briefing room, Lieutenant. Flight training is in Building 6. Kiera met his eyes without blinking. "I know where flight training is, sir. I taught there for 2 years before my last deployment." Her voice was calm, measured, carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from experience, not volume. "I'm here for the Viper lead brief." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Viper lead wasn't just any mission designation. It was the call sign for the officer in command of Viper Squadron, the base's rapid response air-to-ground strike team. Only the most experienced combat pilots flew under that banner. The major's expression shifted from condescension to confusion. He glanced down at his roster sheet, then back up at Kiera. "Viper lead is standing right in front of you," Kiera finished. She pulled a folded set of orders from her chest pocket and handed them to him. "I took command 48 hours ago. The previous lead rotated stateside. If you'd read the personnel updates, you'd know that." The major's face reddened as he scanned the document. Around the room, pilots exchanged uncertain glances. One voice broke the silence. "Prophet. Wait, Prophet from the Kandahar op." The speaker was a captain in the 3rd row, older, with the weathered look of someone who'd seen real combat. His eyes widened with recognition. "You're that Prophet." Kiera allowed herself the smallest smile. "That depends on which story you heard." The Kandahar operation was legend, whispered about in ready rooms and officer clubs across 3 continents. 4 years ago, a reconnaissance team had been pinned down in a valley 30 clicks from the nearest friendlies, surrounded by hostile forces with air support inbound. The weather was impossible, dust storms reducing visibility to near zero, winds gusting at 40 knots. Every pilot on station had refused the mission. Too dangerous, too uncertain. One voice came over the radio asking for coordinates. No call sign, no hesitation, just a calm female voice saying, "Send me the grid." They called her Prophet after that because she flew through conditions nobody else could see through, delivered ordnance within meters of friendly positions, and brought everyone home. 3 passes through hell, 0 friendly casualties. She never talked about it, didn't have to. The after-action report did all the talking. Major Reeves set the orders down slowly. The room had gone from mocking to silent in the span of 30 seconds. Kiera moved to the front of the briefing room and connected her tablet to the projector. A satellite image appeared on screen: mountainous terrain, dark valleys, scattered compounds marked with red indicators. "This is our target area," she began, her voice steady and professional. "Intelligence reports indicate a high-value target operating out of this sector. We have a 12-hour window starting at 0400 tomorrow. Viper Squadron will provide close air support for a ground team insertion." She zoomed in on the map. "Terrain is high altitude, limited flat zones for evasion. We'll be operating under radio silence until contact is made. I'll be flying lead in a Block 52 F-16, call sign Viper 1. Viper 2 and 3 will maintain high cover while 4 and 5 run suppression on identified anti-air positions. Her finger traced a route across the screen. Ingress from the north, low altitude to avoid radar detection. Weather forecast shows clear skies, but winds at altitude will be significant. A hand went up in the second row. Lieutenant Hale, a confident pilot with 2 deployments under his belt. What's our egress plan if we lose comms? Kiera didn't hesitate. Rally point Lima 20 clicks east. If we're separated, RTB protocol is standard. Every pilot gets themselves home. No heroes. She let that sink in. But we won't get separated. We stay tight, we trust each other, and we execute the plan exactly as briefed. She clicked to the next slide. Aircraft specifications appeared, fuel loads, weapons configurations, backup frequencies. Each aircraft will carry 2 GBU-38s, full gun load, and a pair of AIM-120s for air defense. We're not expecting air-to-air, but we prepare for it anyway. The captain, who'd recognized her earlier, leaned forward. What's the threat assessment? Moderate to high, Kiera replied. Ground-based MA and PADs are confirmed in the area. No radar-guided systems detected, but that doesn't mean they're not there. We stay low, we stay fast, and we don't give them a stationary target. She paused, scanning the room. I know some of you are wondering if I can handle this. That's fair. You don't know me. But by the end of tomorrow, you will. There was no bravado in her voice, just fact. She advanced to the next slide, mission timeline broken into 5-minute increments. Wheels up at 0330. Flight time to target is 42 minutes. Ground team inserts at 0400. We maintain overwatch until extraction at 0600 or until Winchester, whichever comes first. Winchester, military slang for out of ammunition. It was a reminder that this wasn't a training exercise. The briefing continued for another 20 minutes. Kiera covered contingencies, abort criteria, medical evacuation procedures. She spoke with the precision of someone who'd done this dozens of times, who knew that every detail mattered, that one overlooked variable could cost lives. When she finished, she closed her tablet and looked at the assembled pilots. Questions. Silence, not the mocking kind from earlier. The kind that comes when people realize they're in the presence of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Major Reeve cleared his throat. Dismissed. Flight leads, stay behind for coordination. The room emptied slowly. As pilots filed out, Kiera heard whispers. That's really her. I thought Prophet was a guy. Did you see her ribbon rack? She ignored them. Let them talk. Tomorrow they'd see what mattered. The 4 flight leads remained: Kiera, Captain Drennan, Lieutenant Cole, and Lieutenant Marsh. All men, all experienced, all looking at her with a mix of curiosity and calculation. Drennan spoke first. I flew with your predecessor. Good man. Big shoes to fill. It wasn't quite a challenge, but it wasn't encouragement either. Kiera nodded. I'm not here to fill shoes. I'm here to lead this squadron the best way I know how. 0330 came fast. The flight line was dark except for the red glow of panel lights inside cockpits. 5 F-16s sat on the tarmac, sleek and deadly, their noses pointed toward the taxiway. Kiera performed her walk-around inspection by flashlight, control surfaces, weapons mounts, engine intakes. Everything had to be perfect. She climbed the ladder into her cockpit, settled into the ejection seat, and began her checklist. Switches, buttons, displays, all committed to muscle memory from thousands of hours in the seat. Viper 1, radio check. Her voice was clear over the encrypted channel. Viper 2, loud and clear. That was Drennan. Viper 3, good copy, Cole. Viper 4, check, Marsh. Viper 5, Roger. Hale, the lieutenant who'd questioned her in the briefing. Good morning, gentlemen, Kiera said, her tone almost casual. Let's have a clean mission. Follow my lead, stay in formation, and we'll all be back for breakfast. She advanced the throttle. The F-16's engine spooled up with a rising whine that turned into a roar. One by one, the 5 aircraft taxied toward the runway. The tower cleared them for takeoff. Kiera pushed the throttle to full military power, then into afterburner. The acceleration pressed her back into the seat as the fighter leaped into the darkness. Gear up, flaps up, climbing through 3,000 feet, then 5, then 10. The world below disappeared. Above, stars filled the sky in a way they never did on the ground. Viper flight echelon right, Kiera commanded. 4 fighters slid into formation beside and behind her, their position lights tiny red and green stars against the black. They flew north, toward the mountains, toward the mission. Inside her helmet, Kiera's breathing was steady, rhythmic. She'd done this before. She'd do it again. The difference was that this time, everyone was watching. The flight to the target area was smooth. Too smooth. Kiera didn't trust it. Smooth meant something was waiting. At 30 minutes out, she began a gradual descent, bringing the formation down to 500 feet above the terrain. At this altitude, they were below most radar coverage, but one mistake, one miscalculation, meant flying into a mountain. Night vision goggles turned the darkness into shades of green. Ridgelines appeared as jagged lines, valleys as black voids. Viper flight, go silent, Kiera ordered. Radio discipline from here on. No unnecessary chatter. They approached the target zone from the north exactly as planned. Below, infrared signatures bloomed: vehicles, buildings, personnel. The ground team was already in position, waiting for air support. Kiera's targeting pod picked up the first objective. A compound surrounded by walls, 2 vehicles parked outside. She locked the coordinates into her weapons system. Viper 2, take high cover, she transmitted. 3 with me, 4 and 5, suppression pattern on my mark. Acknowledgements came back terse and professional. Kiera rolled into her attack run. The ground rushed up to meet her as she dove toward the target. At 2,000 feet, she pickled off the first GBU. The bomb fell away clean, its guidance fins adjusting in real time. She pulled hard on the stick, pulling 6 GS as she climbed back to altitude. Behind her, a flash of orange lit up the valley. Direct hit. Good effect on target, came a voice from the ground team. Viper 1 were taking fire from the eastern ridge. Kiera rolled inverted and looked down. Muzzle flashes sparkled along a ridgeline half a click from the compound. Viper 4, 5, you see those guns? Visual, Hale responded. Light them up. 2 F-16s peeled off and dove toward the ridge. Their 20 cannons roared, sending streams of fire into the hostile positions. Tracer rounds drew lines of light through the darkness. The muzzle flashes stopped. Kiera circled overhead, scanning for new threats. Her heart rate was elevated but controlled. This was the dance, chaos managed through training and discipline. Viper 1, we have movement south of the compound. Multiple vehicles inbound. The ground team sounded tense. Kiera checked her fuel. Enough for 1 more pass, maybe 2. Roger, I'm on it. She swung her aircraft around and descended again. Through her targeting pod, she could see 3 trucks racing along a dirt road, kicking up dust. She locked onto the lead vehicle and released her second GBU. Another climb. Another explosion. The lead truck disintegrated. The 2 trailing vehicles swerved and stopped. Scratch 1, she reported. The mission continued for another 40 minutes. Kiera coordinated strikes, managed fuel states, kept her flight in position. When the ground team called for extraction, she covered their withdrawal, circling overhead like a protective angel while helicopters came in to pull them out. Not a single friendly casualty. Not one aircraft hit. When Viper flight finally turned for home, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. They landed as the sun broke the horizon, painting the flight line in shades of gold and red. Kiera taxied back to the hangar, shut down her engine and climbed out of the cockpit. Her flight suit was soaked with sweat. Her hands were steady. Major Reeve was waiting on the tarmac with the ground team commander, a grizzled Special Forces captain named Torres. Torres approached Kiera as she pulled off her helmet. Prophet, he said simply, extending his hand. My men are alive because of you. Kiera shook his hand. Just doing my job, sir. Torres smiled. That's what the best ones always say. He turned to Reeve. I want her on every mission we run, non-negotiable. Reeve nodded slowly, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Kiera saw something different in his eyes. not skepticism, respect. Agreed, he said. The other pilots landed one by one. As they climbed out of their cockpits, each one made a point to find Kiera. Drennan was first. That was textbook, he said, no trace of doubt in his voice. I'd fly with you any time. Cole and Marsh echoed the sentiment. Even Hale, the youngest of the group, approached her with something like awe. I've never seen someone manage a tactical situation that smoothly, he admitted. Where'd you learn to fly like that? Kiera smiled, tired but genuine. Same place you did, I just had more time to make mistakes. It was a deflection, but also the truth. Experience wasn't about being perfect. It was about surviving your imperfections long enough to learn from them. The squadron began to understand who she was. Not the new girl, not the undersized pilot they could dismiss. Prophet, the one who saw what others couldn't, who flew when others wouldn't, who brought everyone home. The silver Talon pin on her collar wasn't decoration. It was a mark of the Talon Initiative, an elite task force composed of the military's most capable special operations aviators. Fewer than 50 pilots worldwide held that designation. Kiera was one of them. She'd been one of them for 3 years. Over the next 2 weeks, Viper Squadron ran 6 more missions. Each one Kiera led from the front. She didn't ask her pilots to do anything she wouldn't do herself. She flew the most dangerous runs, took the highest risks, and somehow made it look routine. The squadron's performance metrics soared. Mission success rate hit 97%. Friendly casualties dropped to 0. Other units began requesting Viper Squadron by name. But it wasn't just the numbers that changed. It was the culture. The mocking silence from that first briefing was replaced by genuine camaraderie. Pilots who'd rolled their eyes when she walked in now sought her advice. She held extra training sessions, teaching the tactics she'd developed through hard-won experience. She shared stories, not to brag, but to illustrate lessons. The time she'd misjudged a wind shear and nearly crashed on landing. The mission where she'd run out of fuel and had to glide 12 miles to an emergency strip. The night she'd lost her wingman to ground fire and had to tell his family. Her pilots learned that competence wasn't about bravado. It was about preparation, humility, and the willingness to learn from every flight. Kiera embodied that philosophy. She was the first one in the briefing room and the last one to leave the flight line. She knew every pilot's strengths and weaknesses, every aircraft's quirks. When Lieutenant Cole struggled with night landings, she spent 3 evenings flying pattern work with him until he got it right. When Marsh's wife went into early labor back home, Kiera rearranged the flight schedule so he could take emergency leave without impacting the mission tempo. Leadership, she showed them, wasn't about commanding respect through fear or rank. It was about earning it through competence and care. The squadron transformed under her command. They stopped being a collection of individual pilots and became a team. They trusted each other, trusted her, and that trust translated into operational excellence. Word spread beyond the base. Other commanders began asking how Viper Squadron had turned into the unit everyone wanted to emulate. The answer was always the same: profit. 3 months into her command, the base received an alert, high-priority mission. A reconnaissance drone had located a terrorist cell operating near the border. Intelligence indicated they were planning an attack on a civilian target within 48 hours. The mission brief was grim. The target was in a densely populated area. Collateral damage was unacceptable. Rules of engagement were strict. And the weather forecast showed a massive storm system moving into the region. High winds, low visibility, possible icing conditions. It was the kind of mission that had disaster written all over it. The base commander, Colonel Ashford, called Kiera into his office. He was a career officer, gray-haired and stern, with 30 years of service and a reputation for making hard decisions. He gestured for her to sit. "I need your assessment, Lieutenant. Can Viper Squadron handle this?" Kiera studied the mission packet he handed her. The target area was a nightmare: narrow streets, multi-story buildings, civilians everywhere. The storm would make precision strikes nearly impossible, But the alternative was worse. If they didn't act, innocent people would die. She looked up at Colonel Ashford. "It's going to be difficult, sir. But yes, we can handle it." Ashford nodded slowly. "I'm not going to order you to take this. If you say no, I'll find another unit. But if you say yes, I need to know you're certain." Kiera met his gaze without wavering. "I'm certain, sir. Viper Squadron is ready." The briefing that night was tense. Kiera laid out the mission parameters with brutal honesty. "This is the hardest mission we've flown," she told her pilots. "The weather is going to be hell. The target is in a populated area. We have zero margin for error. If any of you have doubts, speak now. There's no shame in sitting this one out." Nobody spoke. Finally, Drennan broke the silence. "We're with you, Prophet, all the way." The others nodded. Cole, Marsh, Hale, every pilot in the room. They'd seen what she could do. They'd learned from her. And now, when it mattered most, they were ready to follow her into the worst conditions imaginable. Kiera felt a swell of pride mixed with the weight of responsibility. These men were trusting her with their lives. She wouldn't let them down. 0400 the next morning, Viper flight launched into darkness and wind. The storm hit them at 10,000 feet, turbulence that slammed the aircraft sideways, rain that hammered the canopy. Visibility dropped to nothing. Kiera flew on instruments, trusting the data streaming across her displays. Behind her, the squadron held formation through sheer skill and determination. They descended through the clouds, breaking into clear air at 3,000 feet. Below, the city sprawled in a grid of lights. "Viper flight, arm weapons," Kiera ordered. She brought her aircraft around toward the target building. Intelligence had provided detailed schematics. Third floor, northeast corner, that's where the cell was operating. She had to hit that exact location without damaging the surrounding structures. No room for error. Her targeting pod zoomed in. She could see people moving on the streets below. Civilians, unaware of what was about to happen. "Viper 1, you are cleared hot," came the voice from command. Kiera's finger hovered over the pickle button. She rechecked her targeting solution. Wind correction, altitude, speed, everything had to be perfect. She released the GBU. It fell away silently, its guidance system making micro-adjustments as it plummeted toward the target. She pulled up hard, climbing back into the storm. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The explosion was small, precise. A single flash on the third floor. The building shuddered but held. No secondary explosions. No collateral fires, just the target eliminated. "Good hit," came the report from ground observers. "Target destroyed. No civilian casualties." Relief flooded through Kiera. "Viper flight RTB," she transmitted. They turned for home, climbing back through the storm. The return flight was worse than the ingress. Wind shear tossed the aircraft like toys. Ice began forming on the wings. Kiera talked her squadron through it, calm and steady. "Maintain airspeed, small corrections, trust your instruments." One by one, they broke through the clouds and found the runway. 5 aircraft landed safely. 5 pilots climbed out exhausted but alive. Mission success. Colonel Ashford was waiting in the operations center when they returned. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at Kiera with an expression that spoke volumes. Finally, he nodded. "Exceptional work, Lieutenant. That's going to save lives." He paused. "I'm recommending you and your squadron for unit commendation." Kiera didn't smile. The mission was over, but the weight of it still pressed on her shoulders. "Thank you, sir, but we just did what needed to be done." Ashford studied her for a moment. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this job." Word of the mission spread quickly, not just on the base but throughout the military community. The operation became a case study in precision strike tactics under adverse conditions. Analysts reviewed the footage, studied Kiera's approach, tried to understand how she'd pulled it off. The answer was simple but hard to replicate: skill, experience, and an unwavering focus on the fundamentals. She hadn't done anything flashy. She'd just done everything right. Her reputation grew beyond Prophet. People began calling her the Sky Commander, a nod to her ability to control the battlespace from above. She was offered positions at larger bases, higher-profile commands. She turned them all down. Viper Squadron was her team. These pilots had trusted her when nobody else did. She wasn't going to abandon them for career advancement. 6 months into her command, the base held a formal ceremony. Colonel Ashford stood at the podium in dress uniform, addressing an assembled crowd of personnel. "Today," he began, "we recognize excellence in leadership and operational achievement." He gestured toward Kiera, standing at attention in the front row. Lieutenant Kiera Vance has led Viper Squadron through 27 combat missions with a 100% success rate. Under her command, this unit has become the most requested air support asset in theater. He paused, letting that sink in. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Lieutenant Vance has transformed this squadron through her example. She's shown us that leadership isn't about rank or size or gender. It's about competence, courage, and character. She embodies the best of what we can be. Ashford picked up a small box from the table beside him. "It is my honor to present Lieutenant Kiera Vance with the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement in aerial flight." The crowd erupted in applause. Kiera stepped forward, saluted, and accepted the medal. She looked out at the assembled faces, her squadron, her peers, people who'd once doubted her. She saw respect there now, admiration, and something more important, understanding. They'd learned the lesson she'd been trying to teach all along. Don't judge on appearances, judge on results. After the ceremony, her squadron gathered around her. Drennan raised a glass. "To Prophet," he said, "the best damn pilot I've ever flown with." They all drank to that. Kiera felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the alcohol. This was what mattered, not medals or recognition. The trust and respect of the people who flew beside her. Late that night, Kiera stood alone on the flight line. The base was quiet, most personnel asleep. She looked up at the sky, clear and filled with stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The years of training, the doubters who said she'd never make it, the missions that tested her limits, the pilots who depended on her. She thought about that first briefing room, the mocking silence, the assumption that she didn't belong. She'd proven them wrong, not through words but through action, not by demanding respect but by earning it. She'd shown them that competence had no gender, that leadership came in all forms, and that the measure of a pilot wasn't found in their appearance but in their ability to bring everyone home safely. The silver Talon pin on her collar glinted in the starlight. She touched it lightly, thinking of the other members of the Talon initiative scattered around the world. Elite operators, every one of them, chosen not for their politics or connections but for their demonstrated excellence under fire. She was proud to be among them, proud to wear the pin, proud to lead Viper Squadron. A sound behind her, she turned. Major Reeve approached, hands in his pockets, looking almost sheepish. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Kiera shook her head, "Just thinking." Reeve nodded, understanding. He stood beside her, both of them looking at the silent aircraft lined up on the tarmac. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "That first day I judged you before I knew you. That was wrong." Kiera considered that. "You weren't the first and you won't be the last. What matters is that you learned." "I did," Reeve said. "You taught me something important about assumptions, about leadership, about what it really means to be an officer." He glanced at her. "You're going places, Lieutenant, bigger commands, maybe a star on your collar someday." Kiera smiled slightly. "Maybe, but for now I'm exactly where I want to be." She looked at the flight line, at the fighters that had carried her squadron through every mission. "Right here with my team." Reeve nodded, respecting that. "Then they're lucky to have you." He started to walk away, then paused. "We all are." When he was gone, Kiera remained on the flight line a while longer. The night was cool, the air still. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of another squadron launching for a night mission. The war continued. The missions would keep coming, and she would keep flying, keep leading, keep proving that excellence knows no boundaries except the ones we impose on ourselves. She thought about the young pilots who would come after her, the women who would face the same doubts and dismissals she had. She hoped her example would make their path a little easier. that her story would be proof that determination and skill could overcome prejudice, that when you're good enough, eventually everyone has to acknowledge it. The Sky Commander, Prophet, Lieutenant Kiera Vance. She wore all those names, but at her core, she was simply a pilot who loved to fly and a leader who cared about her people. That was her legacy, not the medals or the commendations, but the lives she protected and the example she set. In the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. Years from now, long after she'd moved on to other assignments, other commands, pilots would still tell stories about Viper Squadron, about the missions they flew, the odds they overcame, the leader who made it all possible. They'd talk about Prophet with a mixture of admiration and awe. And somewhere, in another briefing room on another base, a young female pilot would hear those stories and think, if she could do it, maybe I can too. That was the real victory. Not defeating the enemy in combat, but defeating the assumptions that limited what people believed was possible. Kiera had fought 2 wars, one in the sky against armed adversaries, and one on the ground against ingrained prejudice. She'd won both, and in winning, she'd opened doors for everyone who came after her. The stars above seemed brighter than usual. The sky, her domain, her calling, her freedom, stretched endlessly in all directions. She'd spent her entire life looking up, dreaming of flight, pushing boundaries. Now she lived that dream every day. She was proof that the sky didn't care about gender or size or background. It only cared about skill, and Kiera had skill in abundance. She turned and walked back toward the operations building, her boots echoing on the tarmac. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, new opportunities to lead and inspire. She was ready for all of it, because she was Prophet, the Sky Commander, the pilot who took down doubters by never giving them anything to doubt. She was Lieutenant Kiera Vance, and she commanded not through force but through excellence. That was her power. That was her legacy. That was her story.